I want to start by just giving us a bit of context in terms of the segments of the contract cheating industry. There's two really useful pieces of research here. The first is from Mahmood, 2009. Now, he identified that there were 5 segments of the contract cheating industry, and there they are. Phil Newton and his colleague Chris Lang, who Phil is here today, did some subsequent research in 2015, and they've suggested again that there were 5 sectors of the contract cheating market in 2015. Now, just looking at these 5 segments, you can see that they're not quite the same, and there's a certain sense in which the industry has actually changed quite significantly in this relatively short time, but also I think that we can usefully combine these two into what is actually 6 sectors of the contract cheating industry. The first one, family and friends. The second one, bespoke writing sites. The third one, legitimate learning sites. The other one, legitimate non-learning sites. The other one, paid exam takers. And then the final one, which I've put on the end deliberately because I think it's dying out, are pre-written essay banks. This has basically been killed off by Turnitin because once an essay has been sold or submitted once, then it can't be sold or submitted again. Now, the segment of the contract cheating industry that I'm particularly interested in my presentation today is this one, which is bespoke writing sites. And it's been broken up, or it is broken up into what I would consider to be at least two sub-components or 2 subsections. 2-sided markets and writing purchase sites. And I'll explain the difference of those 2 things now. The first are 2-sided markets. So when you think about 2-sided markets, think eBay. So basically what these sites do, and my favourite is Essay Shark, is they match writers with clients or with students, and they match the 2 up together. And in fact, the writers and the clients, like on eBay, rate each other with a star rating. And so you actually develop points and kudos and respect as being a good client or a good provider of the services. And you can actually accumulate status credits and get things like medals if you're a really effective writer. Just while I'm here, I'll just point you to that number up there in the top left-hand corner or right-hand corner of the screen. Yes, that is 83,312,190 orders processed by this site. Right, moving right along. Writing purchase sites is the sorts of sites that I'm particularly interested in. When you think about writing purchase sites, think Uber, not eBay. Okay? So this is where people with a particular need are looking for somebody who can provide them with a particular service, who happens to be available and able to do the work for them. And we have found lots of sites. I have hidden the names of these sites to protect the not so innocent. But what you can see from the sites that we found is while they might have different awful stock photos and colour schemes, in fact they look awfully eerily similar. So one of the things we did was we started snooping around, and can I just reassure you, Ian and I are no hackers, but we have actually been able to find lots of information from these sites, which we'll be sharing in some publications forthcoming in the year ahead. But what we want to do is very basically show you how it works from the writer's perspectives. It's much, much, much more complex than this, but this is pretty much how it works. The order comes into the sites, the writers bid for the work, they produce the work, and then they provide it to the students. Now, the data set that I'm going to be sharing with you and talking to you about today is in this relationship. It is actually how the orders come out and are available for writers to bid for. So this is what's in it for me. From the student perspective, obviously what they want is their order filled on time and to good quality. From the writer's point of view, they want easy but lucrative work. And I'll just make a point here that the short turnaround times are the most lucrative. Therefore, they're the ones that they go for most quickly. They're the most likely to be filled quickly. So if we flip this over into the sites and we think about the client site, what's in it for them, they want orders distributed to lots of writers quickly. And from the writer, they want instant access to new orders without having to log on to the site multiple times to find the orders. How does that work? Through an RSS or a really simple syndication feed. These are cheap, they're easy, they're quick, and they're interoperable. Now, you may have seen in the Chronicle of Higher Education report recently an excellent article. There's a string of them that are very well worth reading, called The New Cheating Economy. And they shared a photograph of the stockpiled work of one of the writers working for one of these sites. And you can see here that this person has logged the work and when it's due and how much revenue he's going to or she's going to earn from that, which ranges from $12 to $600. So this is the sorts of relationships we're seeing between clients or students and the writers and the way that they stockpile the work. They fight each other very aggressively for the work, so they want to have easy access to the orders as they're coming in. Now this is important, and I really want you to take note of this and take this back to your institutions. This is how the orders that come through the RSS feeds from these sites look on the sites themselves. Now what's really striking about these are the big click here to order now button and the get a 15% discount on an order above $80. I often get academics coming to me saying, oh my God, I've found my assessment brief on these websites. They've hacked into my Moodle site and they're advertising it for sale. That's outrageous. That's not what's going on here. These are not advertisements, even though they look like advertisements. They are just manifestations of this feed which is getting the orders out to the writers. So if you find an academic finds one of these and gets that sense of outrage, the thing to do is to tell them, actually, this is just evidence that one of your students has ordered one of these assessment tasks from one of these sites. Go and have a look at the ones that are coming in. This is what the feed actually looks like when you need to subscribe to it if you're a writer, and you can subscribe to it using Outlook, Flipboard. There are any number of RSS feed readers that you can subscribe to. It's so interoperable. This is how it looks. This is quite a recent one we picked up. So I want to just quickly go through what we know and what we don't know about this particular data set that we've got. We do know that someone, presumably a student, has been motivated, moved, inclined, desperate enough to place this order on one of these websites. We know roughly when the order was placed, but not precisely. We know that the person who has placed the order has committed money to pay for the work to be done, and we know that the order has been vetted by the site administrator before going out on the feed. We know that the orders are sent out manually by somebody working for the site. They're not automatically generated by the process of ordering itself. There are known knowns. To get very Rumsfeldian for a moment, we have some known unknowns. We don't know who has placed the order. We don't know the institution at which they're studying, although sometimes we do. We don't know the level of study. It could be high school right through to postgraduate research. We don't know how much it's cost or will cost. We don't know whether the orders that come through the feed are all the orders that have been made via that site. And we don't know whether the order has been placed on that specific site. Some orders appear on multiple sites as if they're hunting for a writer. And we also don't know whether the order has indeed been filled, and we don't know whether or not it has been submitted at an institution for assessment. So there are known knowns and our known unknowns. And this was the research question we wanted to pose to ourselves. Does authentic assessment design solve contract cheating? That was the premise, and that's the question that we wanted to address. Our method is that we harvested orders from 85 of these feeds from the 1st of October to the 30th of November 2016, and our data set was 111,958 orders in that 2-month period of time. We randomised a selection of 250 of those orders, used a coding schema, and we did intercoder reliability and intra-coder reliability checking for validation. Of the 250 orders, 29 were unable to be coded, so our data set winds up being 221. They were unable to be coded because there was not enough information, or because there were 2 assessment tasks in the order, or the data actually appeared to be completed work, not orders. So we weren't quite sure what that was doing in the set, so we discounted those. Now, our coding schema returns us to the questions of authenticity that we started with and Rowena explained. I'll just remind you of what they are. But before that, we actually had to have a bit of a guess or a go at putting an FOE or a field of education code onto these assessment tasks before we could code them, because authenticity obviously relates to the field of education quite substantially. We've tried to put 6-digit codes where we can, but generally speaking, we've been able to do 4-digit codes with some certainty, 2-digit codes with quite a lot of certainty. The authenticity factors again are fidelity, asking ourselves the question, would you ever expect to do something like this in this way in the world of work? Frequency. Is this central rather than peripheral to that world of work? Complexity. Is this task inviting students to engage with the complexity, the messiness of the real world? And for that, we use the Solo taxonomy as a rough guide to the complexity of the task. And if it was somewhere between a 1 and a 3 on the Solo taxonomy, it got a no. If it was a 4 or a 5 on the Solo taxonomy, it got a yes. We also looked for impact on the real world, asking the question, will anyone other than the marker see the work or be affected by it? And finally, impact on future practice. Is this that part of a sequence of nested assessment tasks which are iterative and cumulative? And here are our results. This is the number of authenticity factors that we found for our 221 assessment tasks. And what you can see there is that there are some tasks which have no authenticity factors whatsoever, but there are a lot of tasks that have some authenticity factors, but there are some tasks, a small number albeit, who have all of the authenticity factors that we were looking for. The most common of these authenticity factors were complexity, and frequency and fidelity were the next most common, with very few having this indicator for impact on future practice or impact on the real world. Now, of course, we can't measure this against what the authenticity factors are in the real world in general in assessment tasks because we don't have that baseline data. The key thing to take away from this is that we have found authenticity factors in a lot of authenticity factors in our assessment data, right through to none. And this is a heat map that maps the FOE code against those authenticity factors. What you can see emerging here is, interestingly, rather than in our data that we're seeing a lot of instances in engineering, we see very few here in the engineering code, which is that 03 code you can see running across there. But the heat map obviously falls in the 08 code, which is business studies, and 09 code, which is the humanities, social sciences codes. So that's particularly interesting. So I guess our key finding is that authentic assessment design does not solve contract cheating using the bespoke writing site segment of the industry. That's not necessarily what Karen and Pearl were looking at, but that's certainly what Ian and I have been able to find. And there is evidence that assessment tasks that are designed with no, some or all factors of authenticity are routinely procured by students. And I guess moving on, one of the things that we wanted to talk about as a result of our analysis, that assessment design still matters. This is not to suggest that just because you can't design it out, that assessment design doesn't matter. Authentic design is still very important. We should still continue to set authentic assessment tasks because they're good things to set. But don't set them because you think they're going to solve the problem of contract cheating, because they don't. Students have indicated through their survey which assessment designs they would be more likely or less likely to contract cheat, so look for those, but you won't design it out. It's almost always going to be possible to contract cheat. Certainly, it's almost always going to be possible to contract cheat some of an assessment task, whether it's authentic or not. A lot of what we found is just part of an assessment task, not the whole assessment task. And it's almost always going to be possible to contract cheat some parts of a whole program of study. We're almost always asking students to do things that are relatively easy to contract cheat. And a final point is that we should not design out the opportunity to cheat, because that's a fundamentally inauthentic environment in which we're expecting our students to work. In the real world, there are opportunities to cheat all around. And if we design out or prevent students from contract cheating, we are actually falling into a fundamentally inauthentic assessment design regime. So some conclusions that I think we both share, or both sets of researchers share. If academics think that it's impossible for students to cheat in their assessment designs, I've heard this so many times, I've designed it out, it's impossible for students to cheat on my assessment tasks. So if academics think it's impossible, then they won't look for it, and they won't talk to their students about it, or they won't talk to each other about it. And that's a really big problem. We need to address the issue of complacency. If we've got to really take care with the advice that we're giving academics in terms of their assessment design. And if we're telling them that authentic assessment design designs out contract cheating, we are creating a problem, because we are creating the problem of complacency. We need to be vigilant, and we need to talk about it with our students. So that's, I guess, our key conclusion. Yep.